Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and Shawn McFarland. We've got a little special Rangers at the break, at the All-Star break edition, in which we'll talk about where the Rangers are and of course, the MLB draft just happened, and we'll talk about that and kind of give a little bit of a shout out to some of the local guys who went. And then we'll have our, always favorite potpourri section, in which we'll have several topics to cover. But first of all, let's talk about the Rangers. So going into the All-Star break, they won 2 out of 3 against the Astros. The crazy thing about that was should have been a sweep. They should have won that middle game. They had great pitching.
No, they shouldn't have. They should not have won that middle game.
Yes, they should have won it.
No, they shouldn't have. They trailed that whole game. They did make a comeback in the 8th inning, but you struck out 19 times. You went 2 for 17. You didn't take a walk. You shouldn't have won that game. It would have been the second time in Major League history that a team had 19 strikeouts and no walks and won a game. I will not accept that.
Okay. All right. I take it on those grounds. But here's the thing, and you and I talked about this. If Corey Seager scores from second on the single to left to Jose Altuve, then that's going to allow them to win that game. He should have scored from second.
Potentially, it changes the dynamics. But I'm
think about that game, Evan. That is, to me, that game summed up the Rangers in the first half. Yes. The worst of the Rangers in the first half of just as you said. Free swinging, striking out, not doing what needed to be done in that game. And yet they were right there with the capability of winning that game as well. It's I guess it's what frustrates the most about this team. It's not like they get blown out. They are constantly in these games. And when you see the fact that they don't do the little things that could enable them to win games, that just makes it all the more frustrating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, their run differential has them basically with an expected win-loss situation of 54 and 43. I'm sorry. Yeah, 54 and 43. They're plus 47 in run differential, which is 15 runs better than Seattle. In every way, I mean, it just looks like this is an underachieving team. I will say that the one thing, before we get too deep into this and before Shawn weighs in, the one thing that I will say is, what was different about the last week was A, they scored some runs, and B, after a loss like they had on Saturday in Houston, a walk-off loss, and like they did in Anaheim, they came back the next day and showed some resilience and were better at executing. And so they've shown some ability to bounce back and not just kind of muddle along. And I think that's been somewhat encouraging. We can talk a little bit more about the stretch that led up to the All-Star game. But listen, this first half has been nothing short of every one of the words Shawn and I and you have tried to use to describe it: perplexing, confounding, agonizing, frustrating. What else? Bruce Bochy's word was buffaloed. Sounded like Yosemite Sam when he said it. I just don't know what words there are to describe this team other than ultimately they've underachieved.
Yeah, Shawn, I wanted to ask you about that because the thing that drives me crazy about watching this team is that Evan used the word resilience to come back the next day. I think that's a good word. The word to me is just stubborn. They're stubborn in both a good and bad way. They're stubborn in the way that, okay, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep coming out here and playing. But they're also stubborn in that, we're just going to do this the same way we've always done it. I'm going to go out here and take the same hacks I've always taken. I'm not going to change things up. Evan and I talked a little bit the other day about, Zeke Duran, who's not hitting at all. So now he's dropping a couple of bunts here and there. And this is exactly what he ought to be doing. To me, we ought to be rethinking how we think about that. That's kind of a lost art in baseball. Nobody's taught that kind of thing anymore. And yet in an era when it's so much easier to steal a base, to get on base with a bunt, or as we've said before, take a walk. With some of these guys ought to be a double, and then I watch Alejandro Osuna, who's, hitting what, 150, and he clearly has no idea how to bunt. Stands up there and just kind of sticks the bat out. His body language is terrible while he's doing it. It's hard for me to watch that when guys are not making adjustments and doing the things they ought to do. So that was a long way of me saying what I think. Shawn, what do you think?
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think about that Tuesday game in Anaheim where Jose Soriano and Sam Arrighetti from the Angels, like, they couldn't throw strikes at all. They couldn't even find the strike zone. So the Rangers just didn't swing at them. And they worked 9 walks, and it chased their 2 pitchers from the game early, and it forced them to use a position player the last 3 innings. And you saw, like, to your point, like, this ability to adjust and say, okay, they're not throwing us strikes. We're not getting pitches we like. Like, let's not swing. Let's not chase. Let's adjust how we approach this. And then, 3 days later, they're striking out 19 times in an extra innings loss. So, like, you see, like, to your point, like, that stubbornness in the sense of, like, they are coming back, they are fighting back, they are, resilient, whatever the word is. And then you just see it switch back to the same offense we've seen all year. It's like, to Evan's point, and Evan, I thought you kind of summed it up well in your column on Sunday about this first half, but, like, the entire road trip, every game I just sat there, I'm like, this is weird. This whole stretch is weird. This whole season is weird. That whole road trip was weird, where you just have, like, really, really impressive team wins where you see really everything click in ways it hadn't clicked all year. And then it would just be followed up by, like, this really, really demoralizing extra innings loss, or loss where they blow 3 leads in a single game. And then the next day they come back with, like, another incredibly impressive win that they haven't done all year. And it just, I didn't know what to make of that, or how to measure what it means, where this team is, or where it's trending. But I think weird was just, like, the word I ultimately landed on.
So, Evan, let me ask you this then. So, with all of this, and you guys have documented this all season long, we know where the Rangers kind of are, but I've kind of come to the conclusion that when you've got Jacob deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi 1-2 in your rotation, and then the offense has shown a little bit of a spark here lately, like they maybe are going to pull a little bit out of these doldrums anyway. I don't think they're going to reach the levels they reached in 2023. They'd have to have a tremendous burst to do that. It's kind of hard to count them out, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to count them out. But again, I mean, they've played 97 games in the first half. I think in their entire history, they've played more than 97 games one time. And my point there is, it's hard to sit here on July 15th or whatever day this will drop and say that you can't figure this team out. I mean, they've given you more data points over the course of this year, maybe than any season in history. And what they have been is an ineffective offense, largely. They still have the ability, if they can get 120 game blazing hot streak, 15-5, 14-6 stretch, to make a complete change to the course of the season. But I'm yet to see a reason to think that will actually happen. The best thing I can say about this team right now is they played 37. There are 37 games leading up to the All-Star break. 25 of them were on the road. So that's a tough stretch. Now, some of the opponents weren't the best winning percentages in baseball, but playing 2/3 of your games on the road is a tough stretch. That last road trip, you played San Diego, Houston, and Anaheim, all teams that were even or above them in standings or win-loss percentages. They went 5-5 on a 10-day trip, and on the last day of a trip, when they should be dog-tired, they posted maybe their most impressive win of the road trip. In that 37-game stretch, they went 19-18. They more than held their own in that. And so you look at the 30,000-foot view of this team and you say it has underachieved. You look at the last 6 weeks and you say, I don't know how they've done it, but they've slightly played above 500. And if there is, the fact that Corey Seager seems to have hit his stride, that Marcus Semien seems to be on a continual, steady upwards tilt, and even Adolis Garcia over the past 3 weeks has been more effective than he's been all year. This was the first week he's had 3 home runs in a week all year.
Yeah,
And,
I want to comment
add
on
it where
that.
it matters most. Runs scored, right? They scored 5 or more runs in 6 of their 7 games the final week of the season, the final week of the first half. It puts them in good position. All of that said, Kevin, their opponent's winning percentage for the second half of the season is .514, I think, which is the third or fourth hardest strength of schedule going into the second half. So they've still got an incredibly hard uphill battle. But they do play more home games than any team in the American League, if that's worth anything the rest of the way. I feel like we've got more data about this team, and we've got less ability to say this is definitively what this team will do.
Well, I think there's 2 things about that. One is what I mentioned about deGrom and Eovaldi. In my experience here in North Texas, the Rangers have never had a 1-2 pitcher like those 2 guys.
Never.
So that changes the calculus a lot right there, right? And secondly, from a standpoint of what Chris Young might want to do now, I don't know that there's anything I could see him doing. If I'm him, I'm just going to hold pat here. I'm not going to trade anybody because look, if I thought that somebody was going to give me a lot for Adolis Garcia, and then maybe I'd think about that. But here's my problem with that. Who do you want to play right field? Osuna hasn't done anything to make you think, oh yeah, let's give this kid a full run of the second half and let him play out there. He's not doing any better than Zeke Duran is. So I just feel like that. Jon Gray's coming back, right? And so he might be just exactly what this bullpen needs if he pitches to his capabilities. And then you just see what happens. It's not like you're stunting anyone's growth by playing this out. There's enough talent on this team. There's certainly enough talent in the rotation to make you think that they could get to the playoffs and maybe even win a round or 2. And really, no, I don't think they could go any further than that. But I think that would be worth it, right? I mean, you don't go to the World Series every year, but you'd like to be what the Astros have been, right? You would like to see them be a team that's in contention every year. That's what they need to be, because to get away from the talk about 2023 having been a fluke, not the season itself a fluke, because it's too hard to win over 162 game schedule and into the playoffs, but that they couldn't do anything but after that to pick up on where they left off there.
I agree. I mean, I don't think that I would really change a word of what you said. I don't think that there would be a trade that the Rangers would make that would, short of peeling off Jacob deGrom or Nathan Eovaldi, which Chris Young has said flatly will not happen. I don't think that there is a trade that could give the Rangers significant value towards restarting a significant reshuffling of the deck or a full rebuilding program. And I think if you are going to make changes to this team, they're going to come in the off season. And so you play this out and you see if this team, which you put together, actually has the ability to have a run in it. And if it doesn't, you know what you're going to do in the off season. And no, there isn't anybody that is ready to step in and play right field or really take over a position that isn't already playing in the big leagues. So what you would do in terms of projects, I don't have any real feel there. And yes, the Rangers could use, if they're going to add, they could use some bullpen help. I can't think of better arms that they could potentially add than a healthy Jon Gray, who could pitch either a late inning situation or who could be a 7th, 8th inning guy capable of pitching 2 innings, and potentially a healthy Josh Sborz, who's still got some steps to take to ramp up his velo. But you don't have to add any payroll. You don't have to peel off any prospects. You go with that route and you see if this team that you put together and had faith in has a run in it.
Well, and I think on top of all that, they're only 3.5 games out of the playoff spot. I think if we went into the All-Star break, if you had said before the season that at the All-Star break they'll be 3.5 games out of a playoff spot, you'd probably say, okay, like a slightly disappointing first half, but they're within striking distance. I think that's a benefit of the kind of glut of the middle of the American League. And I don't know if the division is still in play or something they should even be thinking about at this point. But, I think when you talk about letting this team go for a ride and seeing what it has and giving it a shot in the second half, like, it is theoretically in a position where that's not impossible to do because of the 3 wild cards and because of just the state of the league, I think.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I don't disagree with any of that. Let me say real quick here, because we need to get over to the draft a little bit. But I do want to ask you guys just one question. We've kind of assumed all along that Adolis would be out, not all along, but after he struggled for much of the first half, that Adolis would not be coming back next year. But, you look at the fact that he's got, 55 RBIs, and we know that he's a roller coaster, right? He's playing a great right field this year. Is it out of the question that they bring Adolis back next year?
I can't see them paying $14 million or whatever it's going to cost for a final year of control for a guy who's going to maybe eke over a 700 OPS this year. If he goes on a tear in the second half and he finishes where he did in 21 or 22, well above 700 in the 730s, 740s, that's one thing. But as it stands right now, he's played great defense. He's moving better, but you've got to have more from him than what he's producing for you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I certainly get that. My question would be, though, is that what do you pay a Jock Peterson at this point? And
you're paying Jock Peterson mistake money at this point.
That's right, and that's just it to me. If I'm Chris Young and I had a guy that I could see here that I want to move up or do, it's like the Osuna thing. Yes, then I would want to do that. I just don't see that at this moment. All right, let's go over here and talk about the draft. The Rangers kind of broke from a recent tradition of taking college players with their first pick, went in high school to take a shortstop. So, Evan, tell us a little bit about who they took and the thinking behind that.
I don't know that I can tell you a ton about Gavin Feene, except that they really felt like among the high school hitters, he really, really played well. I think the big question about Feene and why he wasn't going to fall in that top 10 range of the shortstop group was whether or not he would eventually stay at shortstop. I think a lot of projections had him moving to a corner infield position. The little tiny bit of tape that I saw of him looked like he had really nice hands and a really strong arm. So the Rangers feel like he is a shortstop and that he's a very advanced hitter for a high school hitter. There was a glut of high school shortstops that went in the first 15 picks. The 2 Oklahoma kids, Willits and Halliday, both sons of big leaguers, were in the top 5. And then you started getting a lot more muddled after that. But I think the Rangers, when it got down to where they were, I think if Billy Carlson had been there when they picked at 12, there would have been some real debate about whether it's Carlson or whether it was Feene. But I think I kept hearing that they really liked Feene as a hitter. They just weren't sure if he was going to end up at shortstop. What I found most interesting about this draft for the Rangers is I really do think that they feel like they've discovered some degree of a market inefficiency in the draft. And maybe it's just because I watched too much Moneyball over and over. But listen, they drafted 3 guys, 4 college pitchers all total in their 20 picks, 3 in the top 10, who have undergone Tommy John surgery since the start of 2024. 3 of them are still in the rehab process. AJ Russell, the number 2 pick, had just returned at the end of the season and pitched a little bit for Tennessee. And listen, the Rangers' feeling here is they've got a guy who has done their rehab program in Arizona, Keith Comstock, for the last 18 years, and they really trust him. They've got Keith Meister on staff, who is the world's expert on elbow surgery, and they feel like they can get these guys at undervalued costs in the draft and get better players than for what they were picked at. So I'm going to be interested to see how this plays out. Last year, they drafted 2 guys in the top 10 who were coming back from Tommy John surgery, pitchers David Hageman and Garrett Horn. They're very, very high on Hageman. And so I think this is a trend that the Rangers are pursuing a little bit of. They also picked a lot of college. I think it was 5 maybe college pitchers they picked 14 pitchers overall, including a 2-way player, but they picked a lot of pitchers from Power 5 conferences, which was not something they've done a lot of. And I think that there's something there from their research and development department that suggested that was a route to go. Shawn can talk about a little bit more about the 2 college local kids that they drafted.
Yeah, so they first took Ben Abel from TCU and McKinney Boyd in the 5th round, and he's one of those injured guys that Evan talked about. He missed his entire season, having undergone an internal brace procedure done by Rangers team physician Dr. Keith Meister. And he's one of those guys where, look, TCU is ramping him up to be a starter this year, and he was a preseason All-American. And if he got a full season of starting at TCU, like maybe this is a guy that the Rangers don't have access to, or at least don't have access to in the 5th round. Owen Prooks, they took in the 9th, is from Salt Lake Carroll. I look at Prooks and I just see a college lefty in the middle of the draft, and like I know it's not apples to apples, but like they've done well going after like these local lefties. They got Cody Bradford from Toledo. They got Cole Drake he pitched at Wiley. And Owen Prooks, like he started this year at Duke. He was their Friday night pitcher. He's local. They've had data on him for a while. He pitched at South Lake Carroll, which is like a legit nationally ranked program. So yeah, I think it kind of follows the trend Evan said of, going after pitchers from power conference schools. But yeah, I think they're both interesting picks.
I do want to add one thing about a local kid that did not get drafted, who I kind of had my eye on thinking maybe the Rangers were going to take a shot on, was Marcos Paz from Hebron. He's got an LSU commitment, and he's going to go to LSU, but he was ranked as one of the top 100 prospects in all of baseball, in all high school baseball going into the season. He too had elbow surgery, but I think ultimately, while the Rangers had some interest and talked to him, I think that they got word that the commitment to LSU was too strong, and so ultimately they didn't take him. But I kept thinking in the 19th or 20th round they were going to pluck this guy, and they did not. So Paz will go to LSU. He'll pitch down there. And I want to say one other thing about this draft too, Kevin, is the Rangers on the pitching front have, they don't sign all their guys. But like one of the guys is, I think they drafted last year, Cade Obermuller, who I believe is the son of former big leaguer Wes Obermuller from Iowa. They didn't sign him in the 19th round. They really liked him. They couldn't really get very far in negotiations with him because of the money situation. But he ended up going in the 2nd round to Philadelphia this year. So I think they've got a pretty good bead right now on pitching, in particular college pitchers.
Okay, so Shawn, tell us a little bit about a couple of the local guys that went and where they went. Not were taken by the Rangers, but were drafted overall.
The non-Rangers picks. Okay.
Yeah.
So Easton Carmichael was the first local guy off the board. He's a catcher from Prosper. He's from Oklahoma. He went to the Pirates on day 1. Dominic Reed from Frisco Lone Star also went on day 1. It was honestly it wasn't a great year for local players. DFW didn't have like a guy who was even a fringe 1st round pick. If Paz was healthy, he would have been in that conversation, but he wasn't, obviously. I think next year is when we're going to see Grady Emerson. He's a kid from Argyle. Like he's going to be a top half of the 1st round, top 10 pick, top 5 pick, conversation. He's kind of that next great DFW shortstop, and the likes of Bobby Witt and Trevor Story and Jordan Lawler and all them. But this wasn't really a great year for day 1, top of the round DFW kids. But, I think you look at Carmichael, who was a good 3-year college catcher, and Reed from Abilene Christian, like those are your top guys. And that's not exactly what you think of when you think of DFW producing draftees.
Let's cut to the chase. Kevin wants to talk about Ryan Prager from Texas A&M, mostly because where did he go to high school, Kevin? Where did he go to high school?
Hillcrest. Dallas Hillcrest, baby.
Dallas Hillcrest. How many
Hillcrest
Sherrington children
Panther.
went to Dallas Hillcrest?
4. Or one of them played baseball with Ryan as well.
And listen, I Prager was a 9th round pick by the Guardians. Have a great track record for developing pitching. I think the biggest thing for Ryan this year was the strikeout rate really dropped. He went from 11.4 strikeouts per 9 to 7.9, and I think the walk rate was up a little bit. And I think that that hurt his draft stock a little bit. He had a great 2024 season, and had been drafted by the Angels in the 3rd round. I don't know, Kevin. Why did he go back to A&M? Was the money just not?
The money was not overwhelming, and he wanted to get his degree. He's a really smart kid. He was a valedictorian at Hillcrest, and he got his degree in finance in May. And I want to just say, just what a great kid he is. Comes from a great family. We've known the Pragers forever, and they're great people. And Ryan's just a sweetheart of a kid. So I'm proud of him. He's already got it figured out. If it doesn't work out in baseball, of course he wants to pitch it, obviously, but wants to work in wealth management, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him working with some agency at some point.
I'm not even familiar with those words put together, wealth and management.
Yeah, no kidding. I wish I had some wealth to manage. So anyway, best of luck to Ryan Prager. Great kid. All right, let's move over now and talk about the potpourri. First, we're gonna lead off with the Cowboys training camp starts next week. They report on the 20th, and then they start up on the 22nd.
What day does Jerry ramble? What's Jerry's rambling day?
Well, that's any day.
What's his longest ramble of the year? What day is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess that's probably on the 20th. I guess that's when they report, and so there's not anything going on. So Jerry gets to talk and dominate the news.
We should just run like a full transcript of that, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's the thing about. There was a time when you didn't just give big block quotes from people, and now people tend to do that, and you get to see how Jerry's mind works, which is really too much sausage making for me to see the extent of it. But
I thought you were going to say his brain is made of sausage.
Well, that too. But I will say this. It's like when I was at the Big 12 Media Days last week. Man, I'm telling you, that's just listening to Brett Yormark, the commissioner, get up there and read his remarks, and then people would ask a question, and he would ask the reporter, "Is this your first time ever to be here?" And they would say, "No, this is like my 4th time." Well, what do you think? It's like, what is this, a survey? I mean, the man has zero communication skills from that sense. And then every question he would thank somebody for the question. It's like, you don't have to thank us for the question. This is our job. This is what we're supposed to be doing. It's brutal. So I'm thinking while all that's going on, at least Jerry gives us something to write about. It's crazy, it's nutty, but at least it's fun in its own weird way. So
it is good copy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. There's no question about that. So I will say this, though. I don't see the same, ramped up interest in the Cowboys going into this season. I think this fan base has really been beaten down by what's happened over the last few years. Well, not, I would say last few, but certainly the last 18 months or so by the Cowboys and lowered expectations with everything. So I think that Brian Schottenheimer in his own way probably has it as good as he could possibly have it. To come in after the season the Cowboys had last year, there are no great expectations for the Cowboys this year. At least I don't think so. They may surprise us and do something, but I don't see that necessarily. It has to start with, obviously, Dak Prescott being healthy. And he, of course, wasn't that last year. And one of the interesting things to me is that in this market anyway, Dak has always been a little underappreciated. I know what his shortcomings are, and certainly we've seen those in the playoffs. But the players like him. And last year in the players poll, they ranked him 14th, which is pretty high for a guy who hasn't done anything more in the playoffs than Dak has. But this year he was 79th. So how much of that do we think that is just the fact that he was hurt, getting older, disappointment? What do we think?
All
Shawn,
of the
let's go with
above.
you. Yeah, it could be all of the above. What do you think, Shawn? You're a veteran of Tom Brady. Your expectations are way too high for quarterback.
Yeah, but look, I will say though, like I look at Dak and I don't know what his ceiling is, but like, have you looked around at like the other quarterbacks in the NFL? He's so much better than most of them. Like I would just watch Mac Jones play for like 3 years in New England. Like, you know, like that's how I look at Dak. Is like, I don't know what the ultimate ceiling is, and like I don't know. To your point, like, is it age, injury? Like all these things do catch up to you, but like, I'd hate to see what like half of the league's other quarterbacks would look like here too.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. You know, there's a couple of things involved here. One, there's a really high expectation level for quarterbacks of the Cowboys, right? Because over their history, they've had some really good ones and a couple of Hall of Famers, and those guys had long careers. And so, in a franchise that's only 65 years old, that you had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks and then some really good ones as well who played well overall. That creates a little bit of a burden for quarterbacks here. And then on top of that, the fact that people expect to win, and Dak hasn't won and done that. But you're right. If you look around the league, there's not a lot of great quarterbacks. There are, I mean, at this point, Patrick Mahomes, kind of the storyline now is how he is kind of fallen a little bit, and that other quarterbacks are starting to kind of catch up with him a little bit, and there's not quite the distance between him and everybody else.
Oh my God, Patrick Mahomes wore it for showing up this summer with a dad bod. I don't get it, man. Like people were all over him because his body wasn't toned over the summer.
He's the Luka Doncic of the NFL. Look, he's never had a great body. He is, when he runs and the look that he has when he runs, it's just crazy to me. But he is.
You know what's great about his body?
It's a little thick on the top.
The work, the body of work is really good.
The body of work. There you go. I like that. Body of work. Okay. So there's a question, and Joe Hoyt has come back to cover the Cowboys for us. We had him on the podcast recently. Says that what if they only kept 2 quarterbacks? And he suggested that might be, besides Dak, Joe Milton III, the former Tennessee quarterback that Shawn, you should know a little bit about. He was with the Patriots, and those Patriots fans were really mad when the Cowboys got him for what, a 7th rounder and change to get him, because the Patriots got a 5th round pick out of the deal, and basically the feeling was from Patriots fans was that this was robbery. So,
yeah, I mean, it's.
What is your take on it from the Patriots fan standpoint?
It's very Patriots fan, sports fan, like thinking that this guy that was never really good in college that you drafted and had one good game could like be the heir apparent to Tom Brady. Like that is very like that's the most New England sports fan like perspective I've ever heard of anything. But look, I mean, he's the reason why the Patriots didn't have a higher draft pick, because he started, what was it, one of their final games he was against, and just he went crazy. He threw for like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he looked unbelievable. And I don't have any belief that can be like extrapolated over like multiple games. But if you're the Cowboys and Dak is prone to missing a game or 2 or 4 or whatever per season, I like having a guy with like real upside coming off the bench. And, no disrespect to Cooper Rush, but like I don't think he can necessarily do what Joe Milton did in that game with like the physical abilities and all that. So I don't know. I think if you're a team that's like legitimately in contention and like can't afford to like sacrifice 1 or 2 games when your QB1's hurt, like I like the idea of having a guy that has like legitimate that kind of upside that Milton did show. And I think that is what Patriots fans are so bummed about missing, even though I find it hard to believe that could be anything more than like a 1-game flash. But I don't know. We'll see.
Well, look, and the Cowboys have done that before, right? They went out and traded a 4th-round draft pick to the 49ers for a guy who came in and basically never played. My issue with this whole thing, or not an issue, what I would hope for what Joe Milton would be for the Cowboys is the guy they put a package in for, and they run him out there, for I hate to use the term wildcat because that was so misused. All that was just, it's a snap to a running back is all it is, because they were never throwing the ball. I'd like to see that Joe Milton occasionally, short yard situation, not only as a runner, but as a guy who, you snap the ball to, he might throw it to somebody. So there would be at least a small chance that something else was going to happen, because I don't think that we're ever going to see Dak run the ball again. I think that those days are over, that if something is wide open and he's going to run out of bounds, so that's one thing. But for him just to take off and cut up field, I just don't think that's ever going to happen again because of the injuries he suffered. And you cannot, in my mind, you cannot be successful in the NFL if you don't have at least some kind of running play for quarterbacks. And I think that Joe Milton is a tremendous athlete. So maybe we could see something like that, some kind of package that would work for him. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. All right, let's move over here. We want to talk a little bit about Cooper Flagg. Comes in, plays 2 games in the summer league for the Mavericks. First game, not so great. I think he was 5 of 21, something like that from the field. Second game, much better, scored 31 points against the Spurs, who were featuring Dylan Harper. And I hate to seem really stupid about this, but I did not realize that he was the son of, the great Harper. So that is really bad on my part. He was pretty good, but I think he showed the difference between the very first pick and the second pick. Dylan had a nice game. Cooper Flagg filled up, the stat book. He had a little bit of everything. Also said that he was exhausted afterward because they used him to bring up the ball. And I thought, this is not a good thing to be saying. The next thing you know, the general manager is going to be trying to trade him.
Out of shape. Get rid of him.
Get rid of him. Can't play. So they shut him down after 2 games. Of course, they only play 4, and then they have the playoffs. So it wasn't like it was a big thing. But I think that was probably the thing to do there. So it's good to see Cooper get out and do a little bit of what we expected him to do. Was anybody surprised? Did anybody see him play? Shawn, did you see any of that of them play out there?
Yeah, I caught the highlights, and yeah, I mean it looked like Cooper Flagg. I mean, I want to briefly get on my New England podium here. I know you guys are from Texas and Atlanta, where you produce amazing athletes on trees. But it's legitimately very cool to see Cooper Flagg, like a New Englander, not just reach this point, but have the success. And I think it was really fun watching him. And even it's summer league, and even though it's it's kind of meaningless basketball,
kind of
just slightly, getting to see just bits and pieces of what he's capable of, and it's been fun because I've been watching him since he was, I don't know, a freshman in high school up in Maine.
John called this.
Yeah, I was there on day one. It was me. I was in the gym with him. I taught him how to shoot. People forget that. But no,
that's why he was 5 for 21.
Yeah. You could tell he got it from me.
Well, what would people have done if the Celtics had ended up with him? What would have been the mania in Boston?
It would have been the highest selling jersey, I think, since Larry Bird. And I'm not even joking when I say that. And I feel the same way. Next year's top prospect is AJ DeBanza, who's from Brockton, Massachusetts. Celtics are going to have a down year with the Tatum out. Look, I think it's the same thing. I think New England, Boston, they love their guys. And I think for the rest of Cooper Flagg's career, Celtics fans will be plotting ways to get him in a Celtics jersey. So enjoy that for the next decade, Mavericks fans.
Can we already proclaim Cooper Flagg the greatest Mainer in NBA history?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Is that what we call them from Maine? Mainers? Is that it? I did not realize.
What do you think they call them? Maniacs?
That'd be better.
Yeah, or Mainist. Yeah.
Mainites? Manians?
Mainites. Yeah, there you go.
Mainers. They're Mainers.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. There's
God,
probably not
Kevin.
a lot, though, right? How many people from Maine have started in the NBA?
It's not many. I'll say that. There is a guy whose name I'm blanking on now, but I think he was like a super, super, super role player on some of those earlier Spurs teams.
Okay. We'll do
So
some deep background research on that. And while you're doing that, we're going to bring up the Wings and Paige Bueckers. You know, they had the rematch with the Fever, and so in this one, Caitlin Clark did actually play. Paige might have had the better game. She had 21 points in that game, but of course the Wings lost, which we're used to at this point so far. It brings up the question of how it's going in Chris Coklana's first year as the coach of the Wings. You know, we get the idea, and we've kind of seen it on the floor a little bit, a couple of times where he's had some discussions with players. It looked like things were a little tense. It got a little tense in the post-game press conference the other day when Enrique Ogunbowale had a bad night. There's no question about that. 0 for 10 from the field. And Chris was asked about that. He gave an answer that was, pretty honest. I didn't think he necessarily threw her under the bus. This was not like Pete DeBoer talking about Jake Ottinger. But right after he said what he said, and which basically said she needs to fight through these screens and the other stuff, or not screens, but she needs to fight, be a little more physical. And they've talked about that a lot. Paige rushed to her defense, more or less. Kind of talked about how proud she was of her, the fact that she didn't allow that to affect the rest of her game, and that she was, into the game, all the way. And that comment from her, unsolicited, went viral among, Wings fans and Paige Bueckers fans, probably more to the point. And the feeling was this showed her leadership and the fact she would come to the defense of a teammate, which is, all true that she would do it, but it was come to the defense of a teammate in front of the head coach, which kind of created a little bit of an awkward moment there. So if I'm Chris Koklanis, I'm not taking out any magazine subscriptions at this point here. I don't know if they really have enough talent to be better than they are right now. But when you've got an all-star player in Bueckers, and, as a rookie, and who is giving Caitlin Clark a good run for it as one of the best or maybe the best player in the NBA already, in the WNBA already, then maybe you need to back off a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what position he should be taking at this point. But it's obviously a very tentative situation for him.
Wait a minute. Hang on. Before we go any further.
Yeah.
There have been 2 players who were born in Maine to appear in NBA games.
Who are those?
That would be Jeff Turner, who had a legitimate career.
Yeah.
Played about 10 years, was born in Bangor.
Bangor.
Banger.
What's that?
Banger.
I prefer to call it Bangor.
Okay, you go ahead.
Yeah, I like the full pronunciation. And then Duncan Robinson, who did play this past year with Miami.
Signed a big contract. You got a big contract.
He is from York, and he actually went to high school in New Hampshire. So he's a full-on New Englander. He's
a Division III guy. Played at Williams, old NESCAC school up in northwestern Massachusetts. Then he transferred to Michigan, Springfield College, and played Williams once. I do want to say the guy I was thinking of is Matt Bonner. He's from New Hampshire, not Maine. The guy who was on the end of that Spurs bench. So
well, it's all the same, isn't it? I mean, really, come on.
It's just green. It's mountains.
Well,
rivers,
it's if it was Texas, they would be from East Texas. That kind of thing.
Maine might be one of my top 3 favorite states in the United States.
Maine.
Why
is that?
I love it. God, I love it.
Beautiful.
I've never been. I've always wanted to go. Never been.
My God, it's great. I've got a friend from Atlanta, high school friend from Atlanta, who is taking his family up there for a week. And this is the ultimate. I mean, this is the ultimate in just a useless trip, because the guy keeps kosher. He doesn't eat shellfish. What is he going to Maine for?
Yeah, that's silly. That's really silly.
I don't get it.
Especially when you get like what about a 20-pound lobster for $5, something like that. Isn't that what the deal is?
You haven't lived until you've eaten at Reds.
At Reds, really? Where in Maine is that? Okay.
You know who's from Maine? You know who was born in Maine? You know one of the great Mainers in professional sports?
I don't know.
John Blake.
That is not a great professional sports. You know, I had my brother-in-law, his family had owned an island off the coast of Maine. They were had become a very famous couple. They lived on this tiny island, and he died of pneumonia. Hard to believe that someone would die of pneumonia living on an island off the coast of Maine. Can you imagine with a generator and a fireplace trying to stay warm on that? That just boggles my mind. All right, so from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.